Hey, YouTube theologians, Christ is risen. He is risen indeed. Hallelujah. Do you remember back in the old days when the atheists would read the Bible and say, oh, it can't be true, look at all these contradictions? One of the things that they would always talk about was Easter. And they had a point, at least at first. Because if you go and just read the Easter accounts, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, you scratch your head and you're like, wait a minute. Who saw the angels and who was there and where did they go and what happened and what? It looks like, just first quick read, that there might actually be some contradictions there. So that's what I want to talk about. Is it true? Are there contradictions there? Now, I want to lean into this a little bit because I think this is important. I don't think we should try to... We should be... The Bible is first a history book, before it's a theology book. It tells us what happened, before it tells us what the happened things mean. And we are too quick to jump to the meaning of the events like it's a myth and the history doesn't matter. No, the history matters. The events matter. The facts matter. Now, it's true that on that first Resurrection Sunday, people are running every which way and it's chaos. And you get that in the text. But there's a way to make it all fit together. There's a couple of things that we just need to, a couple of assumptions that are not that hard to make, and then everything falls into place beautifully. We talked about this on Sunday on Easter at St. Paul. I stole the idea of the sermon from Pastor Melius about just getting a lawn chair and putting it at the tomb to watch what happens. Okay, so imagine you got your coffee cup, you got your lawn chair, and you go to the tomb to just sort of watch there. And you find some soldiers and you ask them if they mind if you just hang out in the garden. Probably not, but anyway, just for the sake of illustration. So here the soldiers sitting there, grumpy, fire, warming themselves. What are we even doing here? Raised from the dead, that's crazy. What disciples? They're there guarding against the disciples, so they're suspicious of you. And you see at some point during the night, this is the amazing thing to remember, is that Jesus leaves the tomb. The guards don't even notice. But you'll remember that when the stone is rolled away, it's not by Jesus. It's by the angels coming up. Jesus just walks out. Like he just walks through doors now in the resurrection. And not because he's a ghost. He's so real that the door is a vapor. He walks through the tomb and he leaves. And you're really excited about it, except for you want to stay put for the sake of this video, so you don't say anything and you watch what happens. So now you know the tomb is empty, but the guards are still sitting there. So you see these two angels descend from heaven. They hit the ground, they cause an earthquake, blah, cracks the seal. One of the angels rolls the stone away and sits on top of the stone. The other one goes inside. The soldiers who are there freak out and pass out like they're dead. There's all this old great Easter art that shows the soldiers looks like they're sleeping. They're not sleeping, they're passed out for fear. And the angels are sitting there triumphantly. And so you're watching this amazed, and now the soldiers kind of rouse themselves, and one of them wakes up the other one. I'm adding a little bit here. And they go and they run off to tell the Pharisees probably what they saw. Now the sun is just starting to come up, and you hear now the group of women who are coming to the tomb. And that group includes Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, so probably also the mother of John, that's probably her, Salome, Joanna, and some other women. And they're carrying the spices They're coming, it's important to note, to finish the work of burial because they thought that Jesus was dead. It's one of these amazing things that Jesus told his disciples that he was going to be raised on the third day. He even taught it publicly so that the Pharisees had heard about it. Maybe they heard about it through Judas, because it seems like every time Jesus mentions the resurrection, it's just to his disciples. He takes his disciples aside to tell them about it. But he did teach publicly at the very beginning of his ministry, tear down the temple, I'll build it in 3 days. He's talking about the temple of his body. But it seems like most of the time the resurrection talk is private. But the Pharisees knew about it. That's why they set the guard. So here you have this crazy situation where the only ones who are taking the promise of the third day resurrection somewhat seriously are the Pharisees who didn't believe it. The disciples there, it's almost like they completely forgot that Jesus even said anything about it. That's what the angels are going to say. Okay, so the women are coming, and then you hear them as they come into the garden, and one of them says, how are we even going to get into the tomb? Remember the stone? Who will roll it away for us? Now they come into the garden, and here's one of the key things that we have to just... it's not stated in the text, but let's just add this to the narrative, and it helps everything make sense. They come into the garden, and they see the tomb is opened, and before she sees the angels, Mary Magdalene turns and runs from the garden, while the other women remain. She drops the spices or whatever, and she goes to find Peter and John. Now here's the other assumption that we're going to make. So the other assumption is that Peter and John are staying in Jerusalem while the other 9 disciples, while the other 9 disciples are staying somewhere else. So Peter and John are at a different place. So those two, if we just make those two conjectures, that Mary leaves before she sees the angel and that Peter and John are staying by themselves, then everything else fits together beautifully. So watch what happens. So you see Mary run. You don't know where she's going because you're just sitting there. All the other women come and draw near to the tomb, and now both of the angels have moved in. One is sitting at the head of where Jesus' head was laid. One is sitting where Jesus' foot was laid. And they say beautifully, "Why are you looking for the living amongst the dead? Don't be afraid. You seek Jesus. He's not here. Remember how he told you when you were in Galilee that he would be raised from the dead?" Do you guys forget all this stuff? And so the women, marveling, leave the tomb. They wander around the city for a little while. They're afraid, they're doubting, they're believing. It's all mixed up, they're confused. In fact, Jesus is going to find them wandering through the streets of Jerusalem a little bit later, but not yet. So then it's quiet. The angels seem to have disappeared or hidden themselves. And then you hear footsteps coming, 3 people running. And the first one you see is John, who comes and he stops right at the mouth of the tomb. And then Peter, and he just goes straight into the tomb. And then Mary Magdalene after them. And Peter and John go into the tomb. They see the grave clothes there. They see the shroud folded, laid to the side. They wonder. They come out of the tomb. And you can see on their faces that they've got different reactions to this. That Peter is really puzzled. Where did they put the body of Jesus? What is going on here? And John, he's starting to believe. Oh, the resurrection. So they leave and Mary stays and the angels come back. Now, why is it that the angels appear to the women and not to the men? I don't know. That's a great, if you have thoughts about that, I'd love to hear. So Mary is weeping. She's walking around the garden. She goes and she looks into the tomb and she sees the 2 angels there. And they say to her, why are you weeping? You know who's not weeping is the angels, or Jesus, in fact. They know the story. Why are you weeping? And Mary, it's really something. It's like she talks to angels every day. I mean, Mary, remember, had 7 demons. She's used to the supernatural stuff. Where have they taken him? She sees the angels and still thinks the body of Jesus has been removed by someone. She hears someone come up behind her, and she thinks it's the gardener, the gravekeeper, and why are you crying? He says, sir, if you've taken his body, tell me where you've laid him and I'll take him from you. And then she turns around and Jesus says to her, it's Jesus. Oh yeah, you're watching and there's Jesus and you're pretty excited and you want to say something, but you're just watching. And Jesus says, Mary. Oh. She sees it. She understands it's Jesus, risen from the dead. She falls at his feet. Teacher, falls at his feet. Don't cling to me, Jesus says. I haven't ascended yet. What an amazing thing. And then go tell my disciples that I will ascend to my Father and your Father, my God and your God. This resurrection of Jesus brings us into the family of God. It's beautiful. And then Mary leaves and Jesus leaves. And that's it. That's nothing else ever happens there because Jesus is done with the tomb. Now to get the rest of the things unfolding, you got to get a drone or a hot air balloon and sort of watch. So the women are wandering around. Peter and John probably go back to John's house, and then maybe they're looking for the other disciples. They're going to all end up in the upper room. Probably the other 9 were at the house of Mary and Martha and Lazarus and Bethany. And by the afternoon, all of them are together in the back in the upper room, probably Mark's house in Jerusalem. And in the meantime, Jesus appeared to the women wandering the streets. Jesus appeared to Peter by himself at some point. Maybe John was this and that, and they're all there. Then they're all by the time you get to Easter afternoon, they're all together in the upper room except for Thomas. And makes for this dramatic account. Now the angels all said to the women, go tell them to go to Galilee. Jesus says then go to Galilee. They don't go to Galilee for a week, and I have guesses about why, but I think, and I'd love to hear your own thoughts about this. I think that when all of them gather together on Easter afternoon, except for Thomas, my guess is that Thomas is out looking for Jesus. I don't know. But remember, Thomas is the one who said, let's go to Jerusalem. If we die, we die. So Thomas seems to be the bold one. And that makes the fact that Jesus didn't wait till he got back kind of sting even a little bit more. You guys are here afraid. The reason I think that is because the reason we know that 10 disciples are in the upper room is because they're afraid. So you figure, well, if they're there because of fear, then Thomas is not there because he's not afraid. There could be plenty of other reasons. That's just my own conjecture here. And Jesus comes and appears to them and shows them his hands and his side. And don't be unbelieving, but believing. And beautiful. And so it all fits together. Wonderfully, it all fits together. So I hope that's helpful. I hope that you have some time to read through those last chapters of each of the Gospels in your devotions this week and rejoice that Christ is risen. He is risen indeed. Hallelujah. See, the firewood covering up Luther back there. That was for the Easter Vigil. What kind of crazy service starts with a campfire? Wild. Anyway, apparently we had enough wood around here. We didn't need it. So now it gets to ride around in the back seat. Oh, for how long?